Discover how a millionaire's 3-minute escape plan led to an unexpected, amazing love story. Tom Anderson stood at the edge of his glass-walled office, the breathtaking view of the Space Needle contrasting violently with the knot twisting tighter in his stomach. A self-made millionaire in his mid-40s, he had worked relentlessly to fulfill his late father's impossible expectations. But today, as he prepared for a pivotal merger, he felt the walls of his skyscraper closing in, cloaked in unbearable solitude. The pressure to succeed bore down on him, a mantle of responsibility that threatened to suffocate. The meeting was set to begin in mere moments, yet each tick of the clock echoed an unspoken fear. What if he failed? What if he was perceived as a failure? His mind raced through a never-ending list of potential outcomes, each darker than the last. Behind Tom's polished exterior lay a churning sea of self-doubt marred by the fear of being judged against his father's larger-than-life memory. The company he built his life's work was at stake. As the minutes slipped away, his mind shifted, flowing with anticipation and dread. He had summoned a team, composed the strategy, and rehearsed the pitch. Now, with every passing moment, his heart raced, pushing him to inquire for the 10th time if everything was in its right place. Everything must be perfect or else. Just as he grabbed his notes to leave, the conference room door swung open, revealing his business partner, Jerry, whose unsettling smirk sent a cold shiver down Tom's spine. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Back in the seriousness of the conference room, the atmosphere thickened with tension. As the presentation commenced, Tom's voice shook with a blend of enthusiasm and anxiety. Jerry's responses were sharp, undercutting his every point, but it was as if Tom was flying through the storm, trying to stabilize the aircraft of his ambitions. And then it happened, a pivotal moment that shattered his facade of control. A last-minute report surfaced, revealing irregularities in their financials, manipulation, theft. Tom's heartbeat pounded in his ears. The tight-knit confidence he had constructed around himself was unraveling in real time, and with it, his entire empire. 3 minutes. He had 3 minutes to formulate an escape plan. The betrayal lay in the shadows, blacker than the city at night, threatening to swallow him whole. As he tore himself from the meeting, he fled through the bustling streets of Seattle, unthinking and desperate that in the chaos of his sprint, he stumbled into an art cafe snugly hidden between glass giants. The room brimmed with the scent of coffee and paints, but it was the vivid colors on canvas that captivated him. There, she painted Lily, an art student lost in her world, seemingly untouched by the labyrinth of Tom's reality. The way she moved her brush startled calm into his chaotic mind. Her mural brilliant depictions of the city intertwining with her dreams. Jared opened something inside him. They exchanged lightly charged conversation over steaming mugs, two worlds colliding, and suddenly the grasp of success began to unravel. Lily dared to question his notion of success, prompting him to face the uncomfortable truth that beneath his wealth lay insecurity. And yet, as they spoke, Tom felt a flicker of assurance that he hadn't felt in years. But just as they found a spark igniting between them, the specter of his forged failure loomed high above. Back in the corporate world, pressure mounted, and whispers of disgrace echoed in his ears. He was at the precipice, entangled in a spiral of professional and personal chaos. As he vacillated between the fortune he had built and the warmth of newfound connection, Tom was left with questions that gnawed at his thoughts. Who was he beyond his father's legacy? What mattered more, a flickering, fragile love or an empire built from the ground up? Now, as shadows encroached upon him from every side, he felt an unease wash over him deeper than he could articulate. The fallout from betrayal might soon threaten to rip apart every fragile thread in his life, leaving him in a vortex of despair. As he stood on the brink of a revelation that could irrevocably change his world, another merciless shock awaited him, a whisper of deceit directly tethered to his soul. What cost was he willing to pay for the love he had unexpectedly found amidst the ruins of ambition? Tom stood on the precipice of his choices, the city skyline fading into a blur as he fought to catch his breath. The potent aroma of coffee and paint lingered in his mind, a reminder of the grounded conversation he had shared with Lily, a brief oasis in a storm of chaos. As he retreated into himself, the complexities of his life loomed larger than ever, darkening the edges of his vision. He felt like a ship adrift, tossing on uncertain waters, with two anchors pulling him in conflicting directions, the weight of his father's expectations and the unsettling allure of a fresh connection. What was success? Each heartbeat seemed to question his perception, taunting Tom with his past decisions and the relentless pursuit for validation he had undertaken. He longed to escape the relentless grip of the corporate world, but as he walked along the streets of Seattle, the bustling activity felt suffocating. Each face he passed echoed unworthiness, their voices merging into a single cacophony of disapproval that seemed to reverberate within him. "Focus, Tom. You can reclaim control," he muttered to himself, yet the reality felt crumbling. In his current state, could he genuinely confront the looming scandal? More crucially, could he protect the one fragile light he had found, or would it shatter under the weight of his devastating secrets? As the swirling sea of doubt receded momentarily, his thoughts returned to Lily. Their conversation had inspired something deep inside, a flicker of authenticity he hadn't tightly embraced in years. With her, the walls felt less constricting, even as they crumbled around him. He yearned to explore this unexpected connection, yet felt the heavy hand of impending doom, driven by the knowledge of his compromised integrity. Suddenly, moving through the city, Tom realized he could no longer ignore the responsibility that coursed through his veins. The whispers of betrayal from within his company would soon become a roar. As he turned a corner, the rush of adrenaline sharpened his focus. He needed an escape plan. I had to dig deeper, relying on skills he had long neglected. The thought ignited a new sense of determination within him. He had once taken calculated risks that had led to colossal successes, but those were built on trust, and now that foundation was fractured. He sought solace in the shadows of a nearby park, the rustling leaves and soft murmur of passers-by grounding him. He needed to strategize, not just for this merger but for himself. A decision had to be made. How could he face the board and Jerry again without unraveling entirely? That meant leveraging his strengths while confronting his weaknesses, a delicate balance. It involved understanding that he could no longer navigate his life merely as an extension of his father's legacy. Reaching into his pocket, Tom pulled out a crumpled napkin with notes scribbled from their earlier meeting. Ideas, reflections, several lines that triggered his ambitions. For the first time, he didn't see them as mere strategies for profit, they became a roadmap for transformation. Perhaps success shouldn't merely align with wealth, it could pivot towards personal authenticity and integrity. As he revised his thoughts, a flicker of hope cracked through the clouds that had gathered so ominously. However, as he stood there, immersed in self-reflection, a text vibrated against his leg, a message from Jerry. The shallow words echoed through his core. "We need to discuss next steps regarding the merger." With the known thread of discussions ahead, Tom felt a tether to his past pull tightly. The time had come to face not only his partner's intentions but the depths of his own reality. What was he willing to sacrifice for the love that had shaken him awake? Would he fight for a new path or continue down a road his father had mapped for him? Above all, he yearned for redemption, an escape plan that dissolved the chains of expectation and deception. Yet as the shadows beckoned once more, he prepared himself for the confrontation ahead, knowing full well that every choice perfumed the air with a mixture of risk and potential. Ultimately, Tom took a deep breath, steeling himself for the crossroads that awaited. "The time had come to face what I truly want," he declared silently, a commitment to himself. His next steps would echo beyond the confines of the boardroom walls. The moment for transformation began where the past met the uncertain future. Little did he know, the choices he was about to make would have ripples that could change everything. With the horizon beckoning before him, Tom resolved to step into the meeting with clarity and newfound strength. Yet a disconcerting realization crept in: he might not be prepared for what Jerry had up his sleeve. The coffee shop's high ceiling amplified the whispers of patrons, yet Tom felt isolated in the chaos. He sat at a corner table, the crumpled napkin before him transformed into a strategic battlefield. He studied his notes with renewed clarity, organizing his thoughts as if preparing for a high-stakes meeting. The lingering smell of roasted beans mingled with his anxieties, creating a heady concoction that both energized and unsettled him. With each line he deciphered, Tom confronted his internal resistance to change. He had constructed a facade of confidence, often leaning on his father's respected legacy as a shield against vulnerability. But now, that very shield felt like a prison. How did he manage to build so much success while feeling so lost? The dissonance stirred an urgency within him. He needed to revert back to his original motivations and define success on his own terms. Moments of clarity began to unfold. Tom pondered the time spent analyzing numbers and market trends while disregarding the power of human connection. His visit with Lily had opened his eyes. Conversations with her flowed naturally, a stark deviation from the tense negotiations of the corporate world. With Lily, he felt a connection that went beyond superficial validation. It awakened a yearning for open dialogue, honesty, and, most importantly, authenticity. As he jotted down ideas, Tom realized he could channel this refreshing perspective into his professional dealings. The merger involved not just financial strategies but the melding of cultures and the alignment of values. He could infuse transparency into the dialogue, particularly with Jerry, who thrived in shadows and half-truths. Could he invite honesty into a space typically obscured by self-serving interests? Doubt intermingled with his newfound resolve. How could he risk that kind of vulnerability when stakes were high, and betrayal lived within the conference room walls? Yet, how could he claim any sense of integrity without attempting to change the status quo? The confrontation would not just implicate his professional future but his personal values. His phone buzzed again, this time sending a jolt of electricity through him. It was Jerry, wanting to meet sooner than expected. Breathe, Tom told himself. He could handle this. This meeting wasn't merely about salvaging the merger, it was about standing firmly for what he believed in. Stepping outside, he was met with the crisp Seattle air and streets teeming with life, each passing person a reminder of worlds yet to be explored. He felt a newfound sense of urgency pulse through him, an urgency to reclaim not just his career but the very essence of his identity. Enough time spent in shadow, he said under his breath. Tom committed to embracing vulnerability. He envisioned walking into that meeting as his true self, a man ready to challenge the puppet strings of heritage and expectations, ready to redefine what it meant to pursue success. Leaving behind fear, he prepared to wield honesty not as a weapon but as a shield, hoping Jerry might be swayed by a new vision. With each step toward the office, Tom felt an unmistakable shift, a blend of hopeful anticipation and intense apprehension. Could he navigate through the labyrinth of ambition and trust conflicts and still come out on the other side intact? The office loomed ahead, imbued with the suffocating weight of expectations. Tom hesitated at the entrance, bracing himself for the confrontation. He had a choice, to slip back into the familiar mask of obligation or to step boldly into his own narrative. With resolve set like cement, Tom pushed through the door, prepared to face not only Jerry but the truth about himself. This moment could be a pivot point, the unveiling of the real Tom might finally emerge, but it was also the beginning of unraveling the very fabric of his relationships. He entered the conference room, the atmosphere thick with tension. Every breath felt like a declaration. Little did he know, the decisions he was about to make would ripple through not just his professional life, but the deepening connection he yearned to explore with Lily. Would honesty prevail, or would the darkness of deceit continue to overshadow his efforts? Inside the conference room, the air crackled with palpable tension. The stark lighting cast hard shadows against the walls, illuminating the faces of the executives seated around the polished oak table. Tom took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest as he stood at the threshold, wrestling with his resolve. Gone were the days of hiding behind the safety of his father's legacy. Today, he was determined to etch his own story into the company's history. Tom. Jerry called out, his voice slicing through the heavy silence. As Tom stepped further into the room, he felt every gaze settle on him, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He could sense the expectations weighing down on him, ready to shackle him to the familiar patterns he had always followed. Each step felt like walking a tightrope between staying true to himself and pleasing the power players around him. "Let's get started," Jerry continued, gesturing for Tom to take his seat. The air was thick with formality, yet Tom yearned to shatter that veneer. It was time to breathe life into the negotiation process. Tom seated himself, the smooth surface of the table between him and Jerry suddenly feeling like a barrier that could either strengthen or weaken his argument. He considered every angle before arriving here. The merger's potential was staggering, but without genuine transparency, it felt like building a castle on shifting sands. Before we jump into numbers, there is something I'd like to address, Tom began, his voice steadier than he felt. The intent in his words surprised even him, but he pushed on, fueled by the clarity he'd experienced moments before. I believe that for this merger to succeed, we must embrace more than just profitability. We need to connect on a cultural level too. Jerry narrowed his eyes, the first sign that Tom's words had struck a chord. Cultural alignment? It's business, Tom. We're interested in numbers, not touchy-feely concepts. Every great business thrives on human connection, Tom pressed on, channeling the sincerity he had cultivated during his conversation with Lily. We must align our values, share our visions, and build trust if we want long-term success. Transparency can give us that foundation. The murmurs in the room intensified, shifting from skeptical to intrigued. Tom's heartbeat thrummed louder, a symphony of urgency. Could he truly navigate these entrenched power dynamics with honesty? Would they allow a new way forward, or would they recoil as predators do when faced with vulnerability? I understand what you're saying, Jerry finally replied, his tone edged with a challenge. How do you propose we start this cultural alignment? Tom seized the opportunity, an adrenaline rush washing over him. Let us hold a series of workshops, team-building exercises that foster dialogue and trust. We'll establish our shared values, set clear expectations, and truly integrate our teams. As he spoke, the images of the corporate presentations he had sat through flashed in his mind, powerful strategies drowned among aggressive tactics. This was different. This was personal. This was about making meaningful connections. Jerry leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled under his chin, appraising Tom as if considering a bold new competitor. You'd better be right, Tom. If this fails, it'll be on you. The weight of his words settled heavily in the air. Tom nodded, the stakes high, but he felt invigorated rather than intimidated. He glimpsed a path where corporate mergers could be seen as partnerships rather than power plays, and where true growth stemmed from authenticity. Tom's gaze drifted toward the window, seeing the vibrant city outside, alive with potential. His thoughts flickered to Lily, her openness and genuine curiosity. Could he cultivate that same spirit here? His heart raced, the prospect was daunting yet exhilarating. The room filled with discussion as Tom continued to articulate his vision, feeling the thread of authentic connection weave between him and his colleagues. As he spoke, it seemed as if a heavier layer of expectation began to lift. At last, he dared to glance around the room, waiting for reactions. The eyes that had assessed him with skepticism now held a flickering spark of intrigue. What began as a jab of fear morphed into a pulsing wave of determination. Tom recognized that each minute spent in that room was not just about business strategy, it was about laying the groundwork for a new way of engagement both within the company and, perhaps, beyond it. As discussions unfolded, Tom felt both exhilarated and terrified by the unknown implications of standing his ground. Maybe embracing vulnerability was a risk worth taking after all. However, as the meeting dragged on, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that his honesty and vulnerability would invite unforeseen consequences. Would he be ready to face them when they arrived? What would it mean for his relationship with Jerry, and how would Lily factor into this evolving narrative? With that thought lingering in the air, Tom steeled himself for what was to come, uncertain yet hopeful. As the meeting meandered into the afternoon, Tom felt an unusual mix of elation and dread. Each moment spent convincing his colleagues of the merits of cultural alignment was rewarding, yet the specter of potential fallout loomed ominously in the back of his mind. Jerry's warning echoed within him like a drumbeat. If this venture faltered, it wouldn't just be a business setback, it could redefine his credibility and place within the company. The discussions turned increasingly animated, peppered with lively disagreements and shared insights. For the first time in what felt like years, Tom felt a palpable sense of engagement ripple through the room. Conversations that once seemed sterile now buzzed with energy. Each question posed by his peers sharpened his argument, forcing him to think more critically about how culture and profit could coexist, yet, Amidst this invigorating debate, a gnawing doubt slithered into his thoughts. Was he strong enough to navigate the complexities of such cultural alignment? The idea was admirable, woven from the threads of his ideals, but was it scalable in a corporate world where power often overshadowed principle? As the meeting reached a lull, Tom glanced at the newer members of the team, faces animated with curiosity rather than burdened by skepticism. They represented a change, a shift in the old guard. He noticed Emma, a bright-eyed strategist, raising her hand with a question. What drives our company culture right now? What are we trying to unify around? Tom's heart quickened. This was not merely a chance to showcase knowledge, it was a moment to inspire a reimagined identity for the company. Drawing from the well of conviction he had tapped into earlier, he said, "We haven't taken the time to define it. It's been passed down, like an heirloom, without understanding what it truly means to us. We need to craft our culture together, rather than inheriting a legacy we barely recognize." Some heads nodded, and curiosity bloomed in the air like spring flowers breaking through the frost. Momentarily, he felt a rush of gratitude toward Lily, who had encouraged him to embrace candor and authenticity. Perhaps this was a pivotal moment not just for the merger, but for himself. That he paused and scanned the room. Let us think about the values we want to uphold moving forward. What resonates with each of us? How do we create a workplace where everyone feels invested? His proposition hung in the air, garnished with a challenge, a subtle dare to engage. Jerry, leaning back and crossing his arms, responded with a measured tone, "You're passionate, Tom, I'll give you that. But passion alone doesn't translate to results. Can you uphold that conviction under pressure?" Tom breathed deeply, feeling exposed yet alive. I'd rather fail trying to forge authentic connections than succeed by perpetuating empty traditions. If this merger becomes a mere transaction on paper, we will fail in ways we can't afford. We have a chance to be pioneers in our field, not just participants. The response was immediate. A palpable tension shifted toward intrigue and possible commitment. Yet a nagging voice urged caution. Was this truly sustainable? The meeting concluded with an unexpected shift in atmosphere. The executives were no longer just attendees. They were participants in a dialogue that felt dynamic. Tom stepped out, his heart racing, a heady mix of confidence bolstered by fear. Yet, walking back to his office, the implications of their discussions settled heavily on his shoulders. As he settled into his chair, a thought pierced through the adrenaline, a visceral realization that change was not merely about systems and processes. It was about people, about trust and connection. He had opened a door, but what lay beyond it remained uncertain. The moment Tom allowed himself to visualize success, however, the anxiety of potential loss gnawed at him. Had he inadvertently set himself on a collision course with Jerry, who thrived on traditional means? What started as a discussion about business had transformed into a deeply personal battle of wills. Tom leaned back and closed his eyes, replaying the day's highlights mixed with uncertainty. There lay a chasm between his ideals and the reality he would need to navigate. He resolved that whatever came next, he wouldn't back down. But when he received an unexpected message from Lily, asking to meet for a discussion she deemed important, he felt his pulse quicken. Did she have insights about the merger or something deeper? And there it was, the next test on his horizon, one that promised to intertwine his professional journey with his personal one just as the stakes began to escalate. Would he dare to take both risks? Tom sat at his desk, the hum of the office around him fading into a background murmur as he replayed the earlier meeting in his mind. The energy, the questions, the faces of eager new colleagues, they all painted the idea of cultural alignment as both a necessity and a shared dream. Yet, an unsettling feeling lurked beneath the surface. The prospect of confrontation with Jerry gnawed at him. He could hear Jerry's voice echoing in his thoughts, the doubting skepticism, the reminder that idealism had its limits. When Lily's message dinged on his phone, he opened it with a mix of trepidation and curiosity. "Can we meet? I have something important to discuss." The request sent a shiver of anticipation through him. Was this a chance to gather insights that could further bolster his argument, or was it a simple chat that would bring him deeper into a labyrinth of emotions? He quickly typed a response and suggested they meet in the cafe down the block. The aroma of coffee would hopefully ease whatever tension had built up since their last encounter. Taking a moment to bolster his spirits, Tom reminded himself that he had a vision that extended beyond efficiency and profits. He believed in the transformative power of culture and connection, a belief that he hoped could resonate with Lily, perhaps even ignite her endorsement. As he walked to the cafe, the city bustled with its relentless rhythm. Every step brought him closer not only to the venue but also to the precipice of potential change in his personal landscape. The street was alive with the chatter of pedestrians and the occasional car horn. Yet, his mind was cocooned in thought. What revelations might Lily provide? Would she share insights about Jerry's grip on the company or perhaps offer an unexpected alliance? The cafe's interior was warm and inviting, with a blend of rustic decor that reflected a homey vibe. He spotted Lily seated at a corner table, her brows slightly furrowed, a hint of concentration etched on her features as she scrolled through notes on her laptop. "Hey, Tom," she greeted with a bright smile, instantly thawing his anxiety. "Thanks for meeting me," he replied, taking a seat across from her. "I appreciate it. I've been thinking a lot about what you said in the meeting. Your ideas about cultivating a shared culture struck a chord with me," Lily began, her expression shifting to one of sincerity. "However, I wonder if we're prepared for the reality of pushing against the status quo." Tom leaned in, eager to discuss. "I think we have to be. We can't just accept the way things have always been. But I need your help to articulate that vision. You have such insight into the team's dynamics." Lily nodded, her eyes sparkling with determination. "I agree, but remember, change doesn't happen without dissent. Jerry will push back hard against anything that threatens his established methods. You need a strategy to address that, or else I'll lose my place in the company," Tom interjected, the weight of her words striking him. "I know that's a possibility. But it's not just about me. There's a bigger picture here." As they continued discussing the nuances of company culture, its potential forces and failings, Tom felt a sense of empowerment building within him. Each idea they exchanged became a step toward clarity, but within that clarity lay the undeniable truth that each step forward might also lead to a confrontation with Jerry. "Tom, just be ready for the possibility that this can become personal," she cautioned. "Change invites scrutiny, and some might see your push as a threat rather than a benefit. Then let us make this a conversation about collaboration." "I refuse to back down." Their conversation shifted from theory to practical strategies, and with each exchange, Tom felt more aligned with his purpose. The weight of doubt felt lighter, and a plan began to form in his mind. After their meeting, as he made his way back to the office, the city felt different, brimming with opportunities and the prospect of change. But the underlying tension remained. How would Jerry respond to his ambitions? At that moment, Tom realized he was standing on the edge of a precipice, with the stakes climbing higher. Would he have the courage to take a leap into the unknown, not just professionally but personally? As Tom returned to his desk, the familiar environment felt transformed. The walls that once whispered of sameness now vibrated with possibilities. The scent of his brewing coffee merged with determination coursing through him. He pulled out a whiteboard and wrote down the crucial points from his conversation with Lily, looking for clarity as he recorded everyone's concerns and insights. That a strategy began to emerge from the tangled mess of ideas. Each point on the board became a stepping stone toward a clearer vision: how to engage his colleagues, how to counter Jerry's skepticism with logical arguments, how to make the case for a culture that fostered collaboration rather than competition. Yet, that same weight of uncertainty loomed larger in his mind. Would the others rally behind him, or would Jerry's influence stifle their enthusiasm? Tom's phone buzzed again. It was an email notification from Jerry, headed for a team meeting set for the next morning. The subject line sent a ripple of anxiety through him, discussing recent strategic goals. The sense of impending confrontation hung in the air, sharp and palpable. He could almost hear Jerry's dismissive tone, the way he would play the devil's advocate and challenge every progressive thought. He pondered whether to share his newly refined ideas with his team before the meeting. But practicality tugged at him. What if sharing exposed him to premature criticism without adequately prepping his defenses? He wrestled with this internal debate, torn between the need for feedback and the instinct for strategic secrecy. Would revealing his aspirations too soon mark him as overreaching in Jerry's eyes? Taking a deep breath, Tom shifted gears. He needed allies. Perhaps an informal gathering with select colleagues could help gauge their perspectives. With renewed resolve, he shot a quick message to a few teammates, gauging interest in a casual brainstorming session. Later that evening, as he prepared himself mentally for the meeting, he found himself reflecting on his motivations. Was this about mere cultural alignment or something deeper? He realized he was hungry for recognition not just in his work but in himself, to stand firm in his convictions and not succumb to the status quo. This ambition felt authentic, a reflection of who he was and who he aspired to be. The next morning arrived, and the energy in the meeting room was thick with apprehension. Colleagues shuffled paper and whispered to one another, unaware of the storm that was brewing. Jerry stepped in, his presence commanding, the authority he exuded almost suffocating. He opened the floor with the same tactic he always employed, broadcasting questions designed to provoke. Tom watched his colleagues duck as Jerry unleashed his critique, swiftly dominating the conversation. Dread knotted in his stomach. The safety net of anonymity he had sought vanished. It was time. He took a breath and raised his hand, feeling the weight of the room shift toward him. Jerry, I appreciate your insights, but I believe we need to explore what a shift in our company culture would look like, he asserted, the confidence spilling over into his words. He could feel resistance radiating from Jerry, the palpable challenge resting just beneath the surface. Shift. Jerry's voice dripped with skepticism. You mean upheaval? Not upheaval, transformation, Tom countered, his own voice resonating with newfound authority. People respond better when they feel connected to their work. We're missing that as a team. The battle lines had been drawn, and the stakes had risen. He could sense every critical eye turning toward Jerry, weighing his response. Would he fortify his rebuttal or let Tom carve out a space for his vision, however small? As the exchange intensified, Tom felt a surge of adrenaline. This was about more than just job titles. It was about reclaiming his agency and proving to both himself and his colleagues that change was possible. He remembered Lily's caution, and he steeled himself for Jerry's counterattack. Let us address the real challenges then. Shall we? Jerry leaned in, his tone laced with sarcasm yet not entirely dismissive. If you're so passionate, why don't you present your strategy next week? But be prepared. It was as if the room paused, a collective breath held in anticipation. Tom met Jerry's glare resolutely, adrenaline coursing through him. The moment of truth laid ahead, and Tom knew that if he expected his voice to matter, he'd have to confront not just Jerry, but the remnants of his own doubts. What unforeseen battles would he face, and would he retain the courage to fight them? The unfolding tension raised the stakes even higher, the possibility for growth intertwining dangerously with the risk of failure. Tom lingered in the aftermath of Jerry's challenge, a whirlwind of thoughts converging on a single point: preparation. He knew that he needed more than just a plan. He needed a strategy that could withstand scrutiny, one that would anticipate Jerry's objections and leverage the support he had quietly woven into his network. His colleagues had expressed tentative agreement during their brainstorming session, and now, more than ever, he needed their backing to solidify his vision. As he left the meeting, the air around him buzzed with unresolved tension. He decided to spend the rest of the day drafting his presentation, fully aware that this was his moment to steer the narrative away from Jerry's cynicism. His mind flickered through ideas, infographics, statistics about employee satisfaction, examples from leading industries. He needed to paint a picture that would resonate deeply and broadly. Every point he made had to echo his earlier remarks about culture. He envisioned a path towards a more engaged workforce, one driven by meaningful connection and collaboration. Yet doubts nibbled at the edges of his confidence. What if his ideas were too radical for traditional office culture? What if Jerry dismissed them outright? In an attempt to quell the rising tide of anxiety, he took a break and stepped outside. The sunlight warmed his skin, a stark contrast to the chill of uncertainty gripping his mind. He realized that the mission wasn't simply about changing the workplace, it was a venture into uncharted territory for himself. Tom leaned against the side of the building and let the sounds of the city ground him. He remembered his early days in this company when he had hesitated to voice an opinion for fear of repercussion. The person he was now, a man willing to stand against skepticism, felt drastically different. Could he embrace this emerging identity fully, or would he retreat into the shadows of doubt once more? With renewed resolve, he began crafting his strategy, each bullet point an intentional step toward empowerment not just for his colleagues but for himself. He mapped out how collaborative efforts could enhance productivity, improve morale, and ultimately drive better results. The more he wrote, the clearer his vision became, infused with a sense of purpose. Late that night, postulating through every angle, he sensed that this could be a turning point. But with the promise of transformation came the overwhelming fear of failure. What if he laid all of this groundwork only to watch it crumble in a moment of dismissal? He had begun to see this endeavor less as a professional project and more as a personal odyssey. By the time morning arrived, Tom had structured his presentation. Each section reflected not only data but personal anecdotes, inviting his audience into the story of his own journey from uncertainty to conviction. This was no longer merely about defending an idea. He was ready to share a piece of himself. Entering the conference room, he felt the palpable energy shift again, akin to the tension before a storm. Jerry was already seated, an inscrutable expression plastered on his face. For all the bravado Tom had built around his ideas, the sight of Jerry made a knot tighten in his stomach. But he pushed past it, focusing on the allies he had engaged. They were there, and they believed in the vision too. As Tom began to speak, a flicker of doubt washed over him. What if he faltered? But confidence surged. He remembered the feedback from his colleagues, the shared excitement in the brainstorming session, and he channeled that energy. The health of our culture is reflected in our ability to connect and collaborate, he started, looking at each face in the audience, including Jerry's. What if we could turn our workplace into a space where ideas thrive rather than merely survive? As his words unfolded, he could see his teammates leaning in. The spell of his presentation solidified the stake he had placed in this argument. However, Jerry's steely glare remained fixed on him with an air of skepticism that made Tom's heart race. Would this confrontation lead to a transformation, or would it solidify the wall between progress and the status quo? The moment of truth was not far away, and as Tom reached the climax of his proposed culture shift, he braced himself for Jerry's inevitable counterattack. The tension in the room pressed down heavy. What would Jerry's response be, and would it break him or pave the way for the change he desperately sought? Tom's words hung in the air, charged with anticipation, and the ensuing silence felt like a weight pressing down on him. He had laid bare not only his professional aspirations but a piece of his identity, a vulnerable thread that he dared to weave into the fabric of the company's culture. The room swam in a mix of curiosity and skepticism, with eyes flickering between him and Jerry, as if waiting for the curtain to rise on the next act of their drama. Interesting perspective, Jerry finally said, a tight smile betraying none of his thoughts. The tension had shifted but not dissipated. Tom held his breath, feeling the crucial turn of the conversation was near. Isn't this just another attempt to sugarcoat the status quo? Jerry continued, his voice clipped. You can't seriously believe that today's workforce demands such changes. We're not a startup, this is a well-oiled machine. What makes you think these ideas will translate into anything beyond a nice presentation? Each word felt like a small blow, each syllable sinister in its intent. Tom knew Jerry had built a reputation for resistance. Now, he was faced with the challenge of reframing Jerry's attack. This was not just about defending an idea, it felt more sinister, like a duel of wills where the winner took not only the argument but also the momentum of change. Because I've seen it work, Tom replied, regaining his composure, his determination igniting once again, in companies that prioritize connection over competition, where employees feel invested and included. It was true. He had done his homework, dissected case studies, and talked to leaders in industries thriving from cultural transformation. And yet we're succeeding, aren't we? Jerry shot back, ignoring Tom's rising passion. Numbers don't lie. Our output is up, and that's what management cares about. Your anecdotal evidence doesn't change that. Tom's heart raced. He felt cornered yet also empowered. This was his moment to embrace his emerging identity and challenge the status quo within his own realm. Success can be measured in many ways, he asserted, feeling the rhythm of his arguments solidify under the scrutiny. For example, employee turnover can tell us more about health than just output numbers. A team that feels engaged doesn't just produce, they innovate. He noticed a few nods among his colleagues. Reaching for the examples he had prepared, he presented results that displayed the correlation between engaged employees and retention rates. Companies investing in culture see a direct impact on creativity, satisfaction, and ultimately the bottom line. Adrenaline surged through Tom's veins. He was not merely reciting facts, he was engaging in a battle for the future of their work environment. The exchange intensified. Jerry's face hardened, but the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes fueled Tom further. The audience had shifted, the energy felt ripe for transformation. I understand change is daunting, Tom continued. You might feel challenged in trying something new, but real progress requires risk. We've operated within this framework for long enough. It's time to explore. He spoke with a conviction that felt liberating. He recognized this as his stride, stepping firmly into the role he had long resisted accepting. In that moment, Tom faced a dilemma that transcended the conference room. Would his personal growth hinge on Jerry's approval, or had he reached a point where his self-worth was no longer aligned with validation from his superior? The weight of that realization loomed large. Jerry's counterattack was imminent, and Tom braced himself for more than a disagreement. He anticipated an interrogation of everything he had fought to become. Would this challenging exchange bolster his resolve or end in a nullifying defeat? Tom could not shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of deeper personal revelations yet to surface. The stakes had never felt so high, and he knew the next words out of Jerry's mouth might very well shape the trajectory of his career and his self-identity. But what he didn't expect, as the energy of confrontation thickened, was the sudden crackle of support resonating from his colleagues, a collective heartbeat that might just propel him forward. The question loomed overhead like a storm cloud. Would he withstand the tempest and emerge transformed, or would he succumb to the shadows of doubt once again? Tom stood firmly at the intersection of ambition and authenticity, fully aware that the moment to redefine himself had arrived. Through the cacophony of doubt and resistance reverberating from Jerry, he felt a surge of empowerment as his colleagues' support emerged as a clarion call. In the backdrop of rigid corporate culture, Tom was poised to alter the course of not only his career but also the very identity he had carefully constructed. As the intensity of the arguments escalated, an unexpected clarity washed over him. He would no longer just debate for change, he would embody it. He realized that mere words wouldn't suffice, action was imperative. It was no longer just about the merger. This was a pivotal moment for reclaiming his sense of integrity and self-worth. Jerry, with all due respect, Tom interjected, feeling the synergy building around him, our company thrives on tradition, but innovation is rooted in courage to disrupt that same tradition. We can't afford stagnation with the rapid evolution in our industry. By fostering a culture of collaboration and authenticity, we position ourselves as not just competitors but as pioneers willing to embrace meaningful change. Tom's voice grew stronger, clarity fueling his conviction. We owe it to ourselves, to our employees, and to the legacy of this company to cultivate an environment where everyone is empowered to contribute. Success isn't just about numbers, it's about people. Isn't a time we invested in the very backbone of our organization, our team? A hushed silence enveloped the room, punctuated by a subtle exchange of agreement among several unfamiliar faces. The realization hit him, he was not alone in this pursuit. This was more than a presentation, it had transformed into a collective vision for a shared future rooted in trust and honesty. Jerry narrowed his gaze, visibly unsettled. Your passion is commendable, Tom, but this is a business, not a social experiment, he shot back, seeking to regain control of the narrative. Exactly, Tom replied, heart racing with a newfound assertiveness. It's a business driven by people, and that must reflect in our policies and practices. Shall we not reflect the very values we strive to promote? Otherwise, we risk being left behind, just faces on a spreadsheet rather than an entity that thrives together. With his final statement made, a moment of tension hung in the air, pregnant with possibility. As Tom stood there, he transformed not just into a professional championing for change, but a man reclaiming his identity from the ghost of expectation. Whatever response came next, he felt anchored by a significant shift. He was ready to embrace vulnerability and authenticity. Slowly, one by one, executives began nodding. The tide was turning. At last, Jerry leaned back, visibly taken aback. Perhaps you're onto something, Tom, he conceded, the sharp edge of his demeanor softening. Let us discuss your path forward. and I will reconsider your strategy for the merger." The room filled with murmurs of approval, and Tom's heart swelled with both relief and exhilaration. In that moment, he achieved a personal milestone. He had not only confronted his deepest fears but had also secured a pathway for growth and innovation. As the meeting wrapped up, Tom felt a sense of purpose unlike any he had ever experienced. The once distant prospect of transformation was no longer a mere abstract thought, it was now a lived reality. He had conquered the conflicting expectations of the past, forged his identity, and instilled a vision within the company that promised authenticity over emptiness. Back in his office, he glanced again towards the shimmering Seattle skyline. It felt beautiful and alive, a testament to all he had fought for. He thought of Lily, her fearless ways, her belief in gaining control of one's narrative. Together, they embodied a truth that success was only meaningful when derived from love and genuine connection. With a deep breath, Tom pulled out his phone and sent her a message. "I'd like to share some exciting news. A change is on the horizon, and I want you to be part of it." He knew this wasn't merely about a workplace revival, it signified an invitation for a deeper connection, a weaving together of both his professional aspirations and personal fulfillment. As he hit send, Tom understood one undeniable truth. He had stepped into a fulfilling new chapter, having demonstrated unassailable growth and transformation. He was not just the man his father had shaped, he was now his own architect, boldly constructing a narrative rooted in authenticity. Now, it was time for others to join him on this exhilarating journey. You need to subscribe now to keep following emotional stories that inspire and transform lives. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to help spread these powerful transformations. I want to hear your thoughts. Comment about your reactions and theories regarding Tom's journey. And whatever you do, share immediately with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to be part of this transformative community.